Welcome to Grief, Gratitude, and the Gray in Between podcast. I am your host, Kendra Rinaldi, and today marks a truly special moment for me. It is our 200th episode. For the past 5 years, I've had the privilege of interviewing nearly 200 incredible individuals, each person sharing their unique perspectives on grief. We've explored loss, we've explored transitions, and the tools that help us navigate our journey. So, in honor of this milestone, we are taking a look back, sharing some of these powerful snippets from past conversations that shed light on the grief process, the misconceptions surrounding it, and strategies for healing. These are just a few of many voices that have shaped this space over the years. So let's dive in.
We grieve for the relationship we never got to have with them. We grieve for the future that will never maybe perhaps be different if that person's life circumstances are able to shift in some way. So I think relief can be threaded through all of that. And then right after relief can also come a lot of guilt and then a lot of confusion and a lot of mystery for people as to like, I didn't even really get along very well with this person. Why is my grief feeling so intense?
Grief means intense sorrow. You feel it if something terribly sad happens. Comes from the Latin word gravare, which means heavy. So this is from vocabulary.com that I got that definition. Now, I have to disagree with the part of this definition where it says that it's something terribly sad that happens. And why that is because I feel that there are people that can experience grief even in happy, life-changing moments. I believe that grief occurs when there's a big change in our life of when the idea of or the expectation of what we had does not meet the reality.
Later, when I got involved with hospice, I realized that, we talk about we die the way we've lived. We always say that in hospice. But it's the truest thing. And families validate that all the time when they'll tell me about how their person died. And I learned too that we grieve the way we live. Of course, we are only who we are.
So definitely I can say my relationship with her passing was very different. And so the reason, Ken, that I didn't share it with you directly or with our other sister Catherine or with my dad was just because it can be easily misinterpreted and we each had a different process. And I remember she asked me one day, we went to Stone Mountain Park in Atlanta and we just sat by this lake and we were praying and meditating and talking, and most of the time we just spent in silence, just like looking at nature, which is one of her favorite things to do and one of my favorite things. And she asked me, Danny, like, how are you feeling about this? And I shared with her, like, can I be honest with you? And she was like, yeah, please. And I shared that with her. I shared these feelings. And she was so happy
Well,
to hear that. And she was
so
like,
moving.
and she was like, Danny, I feel exactly the same way.
Oh.
You know, that day I got probably one of the most precious gifts I've ever received. Um, she said, Danny, after your sister's passing 19 years ago or 18 years ago, I composed a song about life after death in the rhythm of cumbia, the Colombian rhythm of cumbia, which is a very danceable and very lively rhythm, which is ironic in a sense, talking about life after death. But she said she composed it with the hopes of it being used as a tool for people to grieve and for people to not be so sad and to be able to feel more joy for the sake of the soul and the journey they're about to embark on, the spiritual journey. In the sense, this song was my way to grieve. And again, it was just a different process for me. I feel, and I'm thankful for this song that she gave me, because it gave me permission to accept her journey of death with joy. That's what she wanted as well. Even though it sort of came naturally, it gave me just even more like permission, if that makes any sense. And it allowed me to connect with her in at a much deeper level than ever before. And it still has that effect every time I interact with the song.
So as an atheist, like a hard line atheist too, I find a lot of comfort in like metaphysics theories, if that makes sense. That's where, as somebody who's very sciencey, that's where I find a lot of comfort. And to the best of my understanding, time is not linear. So what has happened, what's happening, what will happen is all happening simultaneously. So George and I have always been together, and we will always be together, and we're together right now. It's just my perception that's all messed up. And there is this line from this cartoon song, Adventure Time. The song's called Time Adventure. And the line goes, if I could hang all these moments like up on a wall so I could see them all, I would see that what happened is happening, will happen, happens again and again, and you and I will always be best friends. And that song is happening like kind of during like the end of the world. It's like the apocalypse in this world. And that song that will always break me down and just like make me just weep, because it's so encouraging. Like I'm like, it's not it always is. And it's a very hippy dippy way to kind of look at it. But that brings me a lot of comfort. That and the atoms thing too. Like atoms are all recycled and throughout time. Maybe George and my atoms that's how we explained our soulmate thing. It's like maybe our atoms have been the ones that keep colliding and like, you know, running into each other, and our atoms are recognizing each other. And that's where that magnetism comes from. And those same atoms are in other people. So that's how I can still connect with other people. It's all one and the same. Like it's a very, again, hippie way to look at it. Like I am he and you are me, and we are all one and together. So again, George and I have always been together and always will be.
My story, I guess it starts, in childhood, as they all do, but I was, I was raised in an atheist household where we sort of held, I guess, one particular belief that is highly relevant to my story. And that is essentially that when we die, that's it. We're dead in the ground and we sort of cease to exist. And also that this is our one and only life. That was sort of what I learned from my childhood. And, this notion that this is it, this is our one and only life, it sort of caused me really a great deal of suffering, even before my actual grief story, I guess, kicked in that like everything mattered. This was my one and only life, and I really need to make it perfect. I need to have no regrets. And so I held really a lot of anxiety. And for me, that manifested in a real need to kind of control everything in a really sort of severe perfectionism way. And then, of course, in my early 20s, I had my quadriplegic father die unexpectedly at 24, when I had this belief system still in place that, when we die, that's it. We're dead in the ground. We cease to exist, and this is our one and only life. I kind of, at the bedside, in that moment when I was sitting and watching him die, just he and I, and he finally went, I knew almost instantaneously that that couldn't be true. My story, I guess, is really about how death was like a portal for me into a spiritual awakening.
So the moment I decided and I chose to honor her, to respect her, to surrender to what she wanted, not what I wanted. This is her journey. This is her path. She is going to choose for herself where what she wants to do. I can't. I can't do it, and it was killing me inside knowing that I couldn't, but the moment that I stepped back and I said, "Thank you, God. I know that this is her path, this is her journey. I need to let go." I let go and let God, and it was a moment our relationship turned its pages. I was there for her. I was like not judging her. I was not forcing her, tacking her to try something new. I just was there with her, holding her hand, talking to her, being with her. And it was the most beautiful thing that I could have ever done because, like I said, I have no regrets. So the moment I surrendered and just was there for her, yeah, present and it was and what was happening, and I just remember, like, the last week of her life, I would go home and I would just lay in bed and I would breathe in love and exhale fear and say that to myself, and because I'm sure, like, no one can sleep during that time, but I had to choose something to get me through it, and that helped so much. I was at peace finally by the end, I was at peace with what was happening, and we were all there with her, and it was the most beautiful thing. She passed away in their home, and my little sister was holding her hand, and she yelled to everyone because we were arranging things like out in the living room, and we all ran back to the bedroom, and she took her last breath and smiled, and I cried my eyes out, but I was saying, thank you, God," and just like raising my hands, and like I could feel her soul lifting, and it was beautiful. And then that's when you
Yeah, like she
grab
took
the
her last
flute.
breath, and I remember people like looking at each other like is that it? Like, like basically kind of confirming or like looking at the nurse. And my instinct was just to put the flute to my mouth and start playing.
Mm,
And I wanted to serenade her
mm,
on
mm.
her journey, you know. To me, that night felt identical to seeing the birth of my two children,
Mm.
in terms of there's a lot of joy but yet pain, and it's like, and you're tired, like physically tired, and emotionally too. There's just so much going on. It's so intense. It felt exactly the same.
Yeah. I remember for me, it felt because I was also like smiling and laughing. And I remember my kids were a little confused a little about that.
Yeah.
And I've had conversations with them since, but it was that I was just so happy that it happened how she wanted. It was like, and this is what I've told them before. I'm like, it's not that I'm happy that my mom died. I'm happy that it happened exactly like she wanted. Like, who would have thought that we would all be able to be in the same space at the moment of her death? Who would have thought that it could have happened?
The denial of someone's grief is almost worse than the thing itself because when you aren't reflected back what you're experiencing and when you're denied what you're experiencing by people around you that you love and that are supposed to be supportive, you feel, "Oh, am I crazy? Am I?" And then you're alone in your grief.
And so when my therapist said that it was a form of denial, it was kind of an eye opener because if I'm just thinking about the what ifs, the moment before the crash, then I'm stuck in that past where they're still alive. And in a way, part of my brain wants to be there because they're still alive, right? If I'm in that car before the crash, I'm with my living children. And even though it's horribly painful, there is there's a certain desire or temptation to be there. But, but being there is in denial because I did make that turn and we were hit and they're gone now. And that was helpful to me to realize, right, denial is not my friend because denial means that I'm living in the past, and here I am in the present. And I'd rather be in the present where I can mourn my children and live in a way that honors them and makes them proud rather than being, trapped in a fantasy past.
It taught me how to get quiet, to look internally, to ask myself in moments, this was a moment of hardship, but what's the learning? What can I learn here? And as I was training myself on how to do that holistically, who knew what a gift that would be in helping me to navigate a trauma of losing my child.
However, I think I don't agree with the concept of stages of grief, because stages of grief implies first you feel A, then you feel B, then you feel C, then you feel D, and then you're done. And that's just not true. It is not linear. And it implies there's a wrong way to grieve, and that's also false. There's no wrong way to grieve. So this whole idea of stages to me is just nonsense. I think it's much more like waves. Grief is much more like waves. There are these massive waves very close together. And with time, they grow further apart. And sometimes you get beautiful, calm seas. And sometimes, after weeks, months, years, decades even, your back is turned and a massive rogue wave comes at you and just takes you down. That's grief. Now, let's extend that wave metaphor a little further, because what are our options, right? The old Steve Leader, before my father died, whenever any kind of wave was coming at me, any kind of loss, any kind of challenge, my default setting was, I'm going to stand up. I'm going to face that wave coming at me, bare-chested, face first, and I'm going to stand here and take it because I am stronger than that wave. Now, when it comes to grief, we all know what happens when you adopt that posture. You end up turned upside down, thrashed, thrown against the rocks, gasping for air. The other choice, when that wave is coming in, is to lie down, let it wash over you, and float with it until you can stand up again. That's what I learned. That's that 1 degree difference that makes all the difference for me when it comes to how to journey through grief.
This is all part of the grief dance. And I just want to explain for a moment about the use of dance, because it's about dancing, I think, is about partnership and how you're going to partner with whoever or even the music. And sometimes that partnership feels really smooth and easy, and sometimes it's staccato, and sometimes it's jagged, but not being afraid to be in that partnership is part of what makes the grief process and your evolution in your own healing possible.
There was a quality I found during some of those days that felt impossible, of floating. And I think that that is an option anytime for any person to take on an effort, almost effortless, floating through a day. Probably that can be like a very wonderful way to live through a day. During that time, it became the only way to survive. There were lots of days I just remember saying to myself at the beginning of the day, you're going to have to float through this day. You cannot push through the day. You'll push yourself straight into the ground. And so there was a permission, I think, that was really important to give to myself to not have to accomplish anything or exert effort, but to just be. And it was a beautiful lesson for me because I was doing that for Olivia every day.
It was just permission to be where I was at. I was provided verbally and spatially with, the space to process, to talk about it, to be stuck in it even. There was no judgment about, gosh, you have been talking about this loss or this pain for so long. When are you going to get over that? And this is the kind of way that it was growing up in my family. Move on, just stop loitering in it. And so for the first time ever, I had permission to just be how I actually was without having to, as women also, we're very surveilling of ourselves, always checking ourselves and watching ourselves so we're not disrupting anyone's peace in any way. And so this was a permission. Grief is messy. It's disruptive. You go ahead, you be in that space. We'll hold it around you.
Having a grief experience is whatever you feel is right in that moment that you're feeling it is honestly, it's right for you. Who am I to say that you can't punch a hole in the wall? you know, I mean, break an old photo, shatter something, smoke a cigarette. Might not be good to do that, some of these things long term, but if you need to do that right then, grieve how you have to. Otherwise, it's going to find you. It doesn't go away. So when those grief moments like come up, really just allow space for it. Now, with that said, I know how challenging it can be to be at like work and in a public place. And if you need to just get up and walk away, go to the bathroom and like let it out somehow, do it. Just find those ways to allow the space for it because it's going to happen. It's going to come up. And if we try and push it away, that's only going to make it worse. And it can manifest in more negative ways down the line. So as hard as it is, it really is helpful to allow it to come out because it's going to be there.
I mean, to be honest, one of the things I was processing or having a hard time being with was that I didn't feel like I had enough grief or sadness when my grandmother passed. Like, given how close we were and given how much I love her, it was like something about the way she transitioned and just focusing on the light and the love of our relationship was just really carrying me. And I don't know if this is true, but it does resonate with me. I had a friend who said, I have noticed people have a harder time with loss when there was a lot of unfinished business and a lot of pain. It's almost like those wounds get erupted, right? When someone, because then you're not just losing the person, it's like all the other stuff comes up. And I think because my grandmother and I were at so much peace with each other and there wasn't unfinished business or unsaid words. So I think that's a part of it. I grew up believing that death was not the end of life, but rather a transition. This coming from the Baha'i writings, which is the core of my beliefs. So here's a quote from Abdul Baha, and this is from the Baha'i writings. To consider that after the death of the body, the spirit perishes, is like imagining that a bird in a cage will be destroyed if the cage is broken, though the bird has nothing to fear from the destruction of the cage. Our body is like the cage, and the spirit is like the bird. If the cage becomes broken, the bird will continue and exist. Its feelings will be even more powerful, its perceptions greater, and its happiness increased.
When my dad passed away, what I did was I took myself away from the world, but I went into a dark hole. And when I did this with my mom, I took myself out of the world, but it was to rediscover who I was and what I was meant to do on this earth. So it was a very, very therapeutic, very cathartic, um, amazing thing. I was able to utilize her death as the catalyst for me to become who I am today, to be able to help the women that I help, to be able to become successful and have success in my business, in my life, be a happy person. And so rather than letting her death again kind of suck me down this tragic victimhood, place, I chose to become a victor. So I wanted to be the victor of my life rather than the victim. And so and I really wanted to share this story with the listeners because when we lose someone who is very, very important to us in our lives, we have a choice whether it breaks us or whether it catapults us into another level of success for ourselves, into another level of happiness, into tapping into what they would want for us and the happiness that they would want to see us having. And I really believe she's right here with me right now.
Thank you again so much for choosing to listen today. I hope that you can take away a few nuggets from today's episode that can bring you comfort in your times of grief. If so, it would mean so much to me if you would rate and comment on this episode. And if you feel inspired in some way to share it with someone who may need to hear this, please do so. Also, if you or someone you know has a story of grief and gratitude that should be shared so that others can be inspired as well, please reach out to me. And thanks once again for tuning in to Grief, Gratitude, and the Gray in Between podcast. Have a beautiful day.